No, so I mean, I'm debating right now. Do we try to build a Heineke team, or do we go crazy and we do the
We are back. It's the Joe Holka Show presented by FanDuel. Games of the week, DFS stacks, and best bets for NFL Week 6. Going deep into some of the situations that we have to get right this week in fantasy football, DFS, and betting. Of course, we'll build a tournament lineup around those stacks and ideas at the end. We're going to start with Chargers at Ravens. Over-under for this one is at 51.5, the second highest over-under on the entire slate per FanDuel Sportsbook. Baltimore is currently a 3-point home favorite. The under is actually getting a decent amount of love, but it is early in the week. 97% of the money reads, only 35% of the betting tickets on the under right now. But what are your thoughts on this one?
Yeah, this is a very interesting game. Well, one, I think that like we just have to basically consider like the Chargers one of these elite offenses, right? Like we're just at that point. Like they're gonna make teams basically almost shoot out every week, just because they're so good offensively. So I mean, it's just something to kind of consider with them, kind of moving forward. And anytime they play a good team that's capable of scoring points, like a lot of people weren't on that game really popping last week. A lot of steam was on the under for Chargers Browns, and that game ends up going to be the highest scoring game of the season so far. So I mean, yeah, it's pretty interesting. But I mean, right now, like Herbert's just in the bag right now. He's his career high 43 points last week. This is going to be a really interesting matchup, though. So the interesting thing is teams have not blitzed Herbert really at all to start the year. He's been blitzed on just 26.8% of his dropbacks. That's 30th in the NFL. But when he is been blitzed this season, he's completed just 52% of his passes for 5.4 yards per pass attempt when teams are sending those extra rushers at him, compared to 74% and 8.2 yards per attempt when teams aren't blitzing him. Now he's facing the Ravens team that just lives and dies on the blitz. I mean, they're eighth in the NFL in blitz rate already. It'd be higher, but they really didn't see blitz Mahomes at all. So I wonder if they'll alter their approach and just say like, well, we're not going to blitz Herbert either, and take the wrong tack. So it'll be interesting to see how the Ravens kind of approach that. We also have this kind of situation where is Austin Eckler just kind of Christian McCaffrey light now? Like, is he just kind of in that mold? Where now in this new offense, he's getting kind of all of these goal line looks. That was basically the only thing ever holding him back from being an elite fantasy running back. He's number one in the NFL in points scored inside the red zone, and he is just 6 points short of his career high in red zone scoring for a whole full season, and they played 5 games. So, I mean, he's going to beat that down. The Ravens are 20th in rushing points allowed to running backs. They're 28th in receiving points allowed to running backs. And you look at their past 3 games. On Monday night, they allowed 241 yards to the Colts running backs. The week before, they allow 126 yards to the Denver running backs. And the week before that, they allow 174 yards to the Detroit running backs. So, I mean, they've been getting actually absolutely gouged by backfields the last 3 weeks. And Austin Eckler is one of these guys. Like, man, should he really be like 8.5, 9? Should he be approaching that? Like that, his usage definitely warrants it.
That was one of the prices that we saw like immediately, that he still seems like he's too cheap, man. Like 8,400, people are going to be like, oh, I haven't seen him above 8K in a while, but I don't know, man. He's basically priced the same as like Nick Chubb, and the role is completely different, right? So I'm with you. He's probably still too cheap. Yeah.
Yeah, and then we still have Big Mike, kind of firing at all cylinders. He's basically being used as an alpha receiver. I mean, 16 targets last week. He now has 9 or more targets in 4 of his 5 games. Think about this: for his career, now the top 6 games he has in terms of targets in a game, 3 of them have come already in the first 5 weeks of the season.
Wow.
For his entire career. So I mean, he's being used in the absolute role like we've been chasing for years. It's finally happening for Big Mike. And the Ravens have been pretty solid to opposing wide receivers, but I mean, it's not like big, like when you talk about that kind of targets and the types of targets he's getting, you don't care about like matchups and stuff like that, with that type of player. The interesting thing about Big Mike is that he's kind of mushed Keenan Allen a little bit. Keenan Allen's been a top 20 scorer just once so far to start the season, and that game came with a touchdown. But Keenan Allen is still third in the NFL in targets. He's fifth in the NFL in receptions. The volume's there. You figure if this team is still scoring this many points and Herbert's playing this well and he's getting targeted to that degree, like we're going to run into some spike Keenan Allen weeks eventually. Like they're just going to exist by just nature of all the touchdowns can't be scored by Eckler and they all can't be scored by Mike Williams. Eventually, he's going to get a little piece. And the tight ends on the Chargers side are very hard to figure out now. Because Jared Cook's basically what he is. He's a volatile option, and now they're involving Darnell Parham in at the goal line for special packages, and he's getting end zone targets and stealing some of those. So we've kind of orbiting around, kind of Eckler and Big Mike, and then sprinkling Keenan Allen, chasing that kind of spike week for his value. The other side too, I think, is very interesting because we kind of have a strength for strength. This would typically be a spot, right? We've been talking, I've come on the show and talked about Brandon Staley's defense. They invite you to run the football. They want you to run the football. And typically in a spot against the Ravens, we'd say, oh, the Ravens are just going to run down their throat. The Ravens are a passing team.
This is wild, man.
They're a legit passing team. Their running backs are awful. The last time any of their running backs were good was 2017, like any of these guys.
And it could get better when we get Bateman in this offense too, eventually, right? Like, so I'm kind of like excited about Lamar specifically. Obviously, it's easy, I guess, recency bias to see what just happened in prime time. But man, I'm kind of with you. Maybe it's just because their running backs are trash, though. Like, that's got to be part of it.
Yeah, I mean, the best thing that probably ever could have happened to unleash kind of Lamar Jackson and him to take the next step, to evolve was just their running game just being terrible and their running backs being bad. But here's where it gets interesting now, because the other thing we always talk about on the show about the Brandon Staley's defense, what's the one thing they always want to do? They're going to sit in shell coverage. They're not going to give up like big chunk plays in the passing game. Right. David Njoku had a catch and run one last week, but they don't give up the deep ball. And that's where Lamar Jackson's living right now. He leads the NFL in depth of target at 11 yards right now. The Chargers are the best defense in the NFL defending throws over 15 yards or further downfield. They've allowed just an 18% completion rate on those throws. Wow. 4 of 22 have been completed on them so far through 5 weeks. 0 touchdowns, 4 interceptions. That's where Lamar's been kind of living. So now we have kind of like a strength on strength matchup where you might get some point chasing because Lamar now has had his two best games of the season have come on prime time so far this year. And anytime you have that followed back by a main slate, kind of, you're on the main slate, people will want to chase that, right? Inherently. So it's going to be interesting. So it's strength on strength. I could definitely see the Chargers taking away the best thing, what they do. And if they do that, that also takes away kind of where Marquise Brown has been living. He did it again on, Monday night. Not cuts his 9 of 10 targets, 2 touchdowns. Yep. He scored a touchdown in 4 of his 5 games this year, and he probably should have scored 2 touchdowns in the game he didn't. Right. He scored in 9 of his past 11 regular season games now, too, if you go back into last year. But again, the deep targets that we talked about. I mean, 3 of his 5 touchdowns this year have come on throws over 20 yards downfield. 38% of his receiving yardage have come on throws over 20 yards downfield. So, I mean, it's another thing where it's strength on strength. Where the Ravens are getting over in the pass game and where Marquise Brown is getting over is kind of where the Chargers line up and say, we're not going to let you beat us that way. So it's going to be interesting to see, 1, if just which strength wins out. 2, if the Ravens guys are really popular coming off of this Monday night game. And then 3, if the Chargers, just aren't really highly owned. But they also, too, Mark Andrews balled out on Monday, too. So we'll see how popular he is.
That's what I was just going to say, because like a Monday night explosion from Mark Andrews, 2 touchdowns, 13 targets, 147 yards. Like normally we'd see them get pretty aggressive with his price tag, but we basically have him where we've had him the last couple of weeks. So yeah, he's 6,300. This is a slate where we have Travis Kelce. It's a slate where we have Darren Waller, and we do have some heavy hitters. So I guess if you believe that they're going to try and take Marquise Brown away a little bit, maybe going back to Mark Andrews would make a decent amount of sense. But
they have allowed 4 top 10 scorers. The Chargers have allowed 4 top 10 tight end scorers so far on the season. They have faced Travis Kelce and Darren Waller as part of that sample, but Logan Thomas scored a touchdown against them in week 1, and we saw David Njoku kind of be just forgotten about last week. So, I mean, there has been tight end production. Like you said, if they're trying to take away that deep ball, you get some of those intermediate targets get a little more enhanced.
Yeah, I think at least on the Chargers side of it, I kind of believe in the Big Mike stuff right now. He's 3rd in the league in weighted opportunity rating. Like you said, the role gets different this year. So like we got to kind of reassess what we think about this offense. I think there's honestly probably too many people that are holding on to the Keenan Allen stuff. I want to be early on if this is a true shift in this offense and Big Mike is the alpha, which I mean, it seems like is very possible at this point. If people don't want to pay that price tag for him, I don't even mind going back to him in this spot. So I think it's a really interesting game from a stacking perspective. Do you have a side that you prefer overweighting in this one, from a DFS stack perspective?
Yeah, I think the Chargers would still be. I think that I'm probably going to come in a little under on the Ravens. I'll sprinkle them in, but I think I'm probably going to come under the field. Which anytime you'd come under on Lamar Jackson, it'd come back to bite you. But it is a great quarterback slate in general.
It is, for sure. I'm with you. Is there a bet in this game you like, Reese, before we move on?
On this side, I mean, I would be very keen on the Chargers. We get the Ravens on a short week after a big win. We saw them the last time they did this against the Chiefs. They came back and almost lost to the Lions. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, I would definitely not sleep on the Chargers here.
All right, game number 2, Kansas City at Washington. We have the Chiefs back on the main slate. They're minus 6.5-point road favorites. The over-under is at 55.5 per FanDuel Sportsbook. Not a ton of sharp action in this one, Reeves. What do you think about it so far?
Yeah, I mean, these are the two most movable objects in the NFL, right? These defenses. I mean, the Chiefs have allowed 30 or more points in 4 straight games. The first time in franchise history they've ever done that. Washington's allowed 30 or more points in each of their last 3 games. Chiefs games are averaging a combined 63 points per game. It's the most in the NFL. They've allowed every single team they face to hit their implied team total this season. And then games involving Washington are averaging 56 points per game. That's the 4th most in the NFL. These are the 2 worst teams in terms of scoring rate per drive allowed. I don't know who stops anyone in this game because they haven't stopped anyone so far. I mean, you even when you look at some of the offenses they face, and the Chiefs have faced some good offenses to start the year, but they got 460 yards and don't force the Eagles to punt 2 weeks ago, who aren't an elite offense. And you look at Washington, I mean, they just get steamrolled by a Saints team that really had no interest in passing until last week. These teams, and the Giants also roasted the Washington too on Thursday night for a ton of yards and points. So, I mean, these teams have not stopped anybody. I mean, this is probably going to be the most popular game of the slate. The good thing is that you always have to pay for the Chiefs side usually. It's the one kind of saving grace is when the Chiefs are on the main slate and they're in these games, that at least you have to pay for Tyreek and you have to pay for Kelsey. FanDuel never gives you a freebie on Kelsey. Like, he never drops. He never wavers at tight end. You might be able to get cute and say you want to play Darrell Williams. He saw 70% of the snaps last year when Clyde Edwards-Helaire missed, those 2 games. He had 10 of the 12 backfield opportunities last week when Clyde Edwards-Helaire left the game. But I mean, are you ever going to be excited to play Darrell Williams? Like, what kind of upside are we really getting? Like, what at his price? Like, is he a guy that can get us 20? Can he get us 25? I don't know if he has that in him, really.
It's so touchdown heavy though, or he hit the price. Like, it's I mean, he's cheaper this week than we had Damian Williams last week, and everyone's talking about how that was just like the outlier floor, basically price point for a guy that's going to touch the ball as much. So I think that this is one of those situations where I think I kind of got it wrong with trying to jam in Madison last week, just because my other team where I was trying to leverage Madison, I basically just onslaughted the Minnesota side of the ball. And Justin Freeman on Twitter made a really good point about that specific thing. When we have these like free square running backs, just fading them blindly for the passing game isn't really the way to go about it. What you want to do is find these really high priced running backs, and then you fade it for basically a stack on the other side. Honestly, it might have provided me more leverage, more differentiation if I just would have played that cousin stacks with Madison, right? So I don't know if necessarily fading them completely is the right to go. You just have to find different roster constructions with them. So I want to make sure that we at least touched on that quickly, because I mean, that price point is crazy. I mean, that's how you like unlock pieces of this game, right, is by playing someone that's very cheap, and might as well just add to your correlation, at least in my opinion. So what do we think about Terry's ownership though? Because if you are stacking this game up, it's hard to play Terry. He's expensive, right? So you're not playing Tyreek, Kelsey, bringing it back with McLaurin. It's not easy to do.
Yeah, especially if you're going to play Mahomes. If you want to play Mahomes, I mean, Heineke is kind of like mid price there. He's 7.3. And he's a guy that, he's a guy that he was towing the line before last week of basically like flirting with disaster every week. He'd make a couple plays a game where you're just like, don't do that, buddy. And then they'd get over and throw a touchdown pass. But he also is a guy that was the first start that he had with Washington, even counting the playoff game they had last year, where he's had fewer than 20 fantasy points. And, you look at the Chiefs, I mean, they're 30th in yards allowed per pass attempt. They're 31st in yards allowed per completion. They're 26th in touchdown rate. Heineke can run a little bit. He's had 4 more rushing points in each of the past 3 games. McLaurin has been, kind of up and down this year, kind of due to some of that quarterback play that we talked about with Heineke. He's also he's run into some tougher matchups too that kind of have fleshed out over the course of the first 5 weeks that have been tougher matchups for wide receivers. He had Marshawn Lattimore last week. He had Tre'Davious White 2 weeks ago. And then the Chargers have given up no production to lead wide receivers at all this season. Absolutely. They're number 1 in the league against wide receiver ones for some of the reasons we talked about earlier. So, I mean, yeah, he's going to be popular, but like I said, the wide receivers are averaging 9.6 yards per target against the Chiefs. That's 27th in the NFL. They're 31st in touchdown rate allowed per target to wide receivers. And they have allowed 58% completion rate on throws over 15 yards downfield. That's 31st in the league too. So this is kind of a smoke 'em if you got him game. If you're looking for some cheap guys, obviously we do have a couple. You mentioned Darrell Williams. We also have Ricky Seals-Jones on the board here. He played 99% of the team snaps last week. he had a respectable 5 catches for 41 yards, but he had a 30-yard catch come back due to penalty, and he also had 3 end zone targets that weren't converted. So, I mean, that's a pretty beefy role for a guy that's 5K in a game that has the highest game total on the slate and could even potentially go over. The Chiefs also are 31st in catch rate on the tight ends, and they're allowing 12.3 yards per target to opposing tight ends, which is 31st in the league as well. So, I mean, they're an equal opportunity defense. Like, they're giving up points to whoever you want to play against. So, Ricky Seals-Jones at 5K can get us some of those pieces that we kind of talked about. And then we have the interesting dynamic of, does anyone play Antonio Gibson in this game? He's not a guy that, well, he's going to always have the Q next to him every week. So some people just don't like clicking on guys that have the Q.
That's the thing. We joke about it, but like legitimately, like I have one of my buddies that was, he made a lineup for, I can't remember, we were going to the Vikings game. He's like, can I play this guy? Like he's literally like asking me about a guy that's a Q next to him. I forget what it was. I was like, yeah, he's playing. Like, but the casual person's going to see that and just be like, I'm not playing that guy.
So Gibson is basically for the rest of the season, he's not going to play practice on like Wednesdays at all minimum with this shin injury he has, because they said like it's not really going to go away. He's just going to play through it. So it's never going to go away. So I doubt he ever practices on Wednesdays. So, him practicing he's just going to carry the Q tag basically every week, and people won't click on him. But, we saw last week he still played the full amount of snaps. I mean, he had 22 touches last week. He found little room to run against a great Saints defense, but he does get in the paint for 2 touchdowns. He still has that goal line role as long as it doesn't come in 2-minute drills. And the Chiefs, as long as you want to run on him, but the dynamic here with Gibson is interesting because you can run on the Chiefs while you can. They're allowing 4.7 yards per carry, 26 in the NFL, but they face the 6th fewest rushing attempts because they get out to leads. And Gibson is 24th among all running backs in route participation per team dropback. So we've seen him kind of these games, if it gets away from, we saw it a couple weeks ago against the Bills, right? Like he's just not going to be on the field if they're in the 2-minute drill and hurry up offense. But I think from a tournament stance, though, it makes him really interesting because 1, he's going to carry the Q tag, and 2, we know he can still get into the paint if they're in the goal line, and if the Washington is punching back in this game and they aren't down by like 17 early or something like that, which is a range of outcomes. But that's why he probably makes for a fun tournament play in this game. So, I mean, this is, like I said, it's a smoke him if you got him game. Everyone's kind of expensive. Darrell Williams and Ricky Seals-Jones are the cheap pieces to the unlock pieces.
Yeah, if you wanted to stack up the other side, you could go Heineke, McLaurin, Ricky Seals-Jones, bring it back with Tyreek. I think that we talked about this with Jake on one of the first looks, or maybe I can't remember when it was, but this was even last year. Like some of these games where Tyreek Hill gets there, he actually doesn't really bring everyone with him from his team because these huge plays really takes a lot from them just kind of like working their way up the field, right? So like, yeah, the doubles with Mahomes and Kelsey have gotten there because the target share was just so condensed, but they also make really good bringbacks if this game does shoot out, just because they can get there on their own in a game where maybe even Mahomes doesn't pay off. So I like the bringbacks with Tyreek, and especially just grabbing a 5K tight end with that type of, I guess, athleticism, all the end zone targets. Like it's a good spot to be on the Washington side of this as well. Reeves, any bets in this game that stand out to you?
I mean, I know the total's high, but I don't. Does anyone stop anybody in this game? I mean, this game could be one of those games that has 60+ points in it for sure.
I'm with you. I was a little bit nervous. I get nervous with the Chargers and Ravens in general sometimes, just because I don't know, maybe I have weird biases there. Like that under makes more sense to me than this one for sure. Like this one, I don't think either team is going to be able to stop these offenses. So before we move on to the next one, though, guys, I want you guys to smash that like button, of course. But just kind of looking at this video, I know that only about 10% of you guys have hit that notification bell. So make sure you guys correct that before we move on. You want to see these videos first. That's the best way to do it. So game number 3, Arizona at Cleveland. The Browns are 3-point home favorites. This game is sitting with a 50-point over-under per FanDuel Sportsbook. Looks like the Sharps are on Cleveland early, 81% of the money, only 55% of the betting tickets. Reeves, what do you think about this one?
Yeah, this one could be fun too. I mean, this total feels like it could be a little bit light because both these teams, I think, are capable of scoring. Last week was the first time Arizona basically got stopped the entire season. We've also seen Cleveland in some of these games that have kind of these like middling point totals. Like they can really get over. Like Cleveland can score points. I think we saw that last week too. People think it was just a run team. And then them having like maybe like a lower floor games like where we don't get a lot of play value. but they can definitely score points, and they can score them in a hurry. And we kind of saw that, basically at the end of last season too. Remember, they played in a few shootouts at the end of last season against Tennessee, the Ravens Monday night game. They're capable of having some games that go really bonkers and haywire. And this one could definitely be one of those, especially if the Browns defense is pretty banged up. They didn't have Jadeveon Clowney last week. It'll be interesting to see if he is able to play, because it made a big difference. Last week without Jadeveon Clowney, the Browns pressured Justin Herbert on just 25% of his dropbacks. That was 29th in the NFL. Their previous pressure rates, the previous 3 weeks, were 54%, 53%, and 37%. So, I mean, it was a significant difference, and it impacted their defense. They've got a lot of guys kind of banged up on the defensive side of the ball, and we always know Kyler can get there. Interesting, Kyler, just the one rushing yard last week. Not very common, for Kyler.
That's kind of odd. Does that make you? So I heard Davis talking about this. I can't remember what podcast it was, but it made me think a little bit. So like we think about Kyler as someone that we're increasing all of his inputs because of the fantasy production on the ground. If that scales back, we've also seen basically his yards per attempt go up. Everything he's been doing through the air has gone up this year as well. But if you like put those things in a vacuum and swoosh them together, we'd almost rather have him be rushing than like passing the way he is in some ways. So I don't know. Like I understand like what Kyler's doing, and if you're trying to poke any holes in it whatsoever, it's that like he really has to go crazy through the air if he's not going to run as much as he did last year, right? Like, I mean, we're not talking about like basically anywhere near the rushing volume that we had last year.
Yeah, and we've seen the split, the rushing touchdown split. Like a lot of people don't look at, rushing touchdown splits on a team level, right? And like think about regression in that way, like a team regression. So, you look at the last 2 weeks, I mean, they're scoring all their touchdowns on the ground now. The first week is the pass, and it oscillated back. So, I mean, it's going to swing back too. The Browns also on the other side of the team, they're dead last in the NFL. Only 25% of their offensive touchdowns have come via passing. It's the lowest rate in the NFL. The league-based rate is 62% right now.
Wow.
So, I mean, there's going to be a swing where there's going to be a game where like Baker Mayfield throws 3 or 4 touchdowns. There just is, because that's how these things work over the course of an NFL season. Will this be the week? I don't know, but it's definitely going to exist. Because the Browns
don't make me play OBJ again, man. It's been so painful. It's just like
I won't make you. But this is
he seems like such a great buy low, though, doesn't he? Especially if, like what you're saying, if they're going to have a game through the air at some point, it's got to come through OBJ.
Yeah, I mean, it's just how things work in the NFL. Like the Browns aren't going to go over the course of the season and score 75% of their touchdowns rushing. They're just not. That's just not going to happen. And no one in NFL history does something like that. Mm-hmm. So there is going to be a game where it does it, and why not be one of these games where they face one of these offenses they're going to have to punch with, right?
Right.
Like, I mean, so maybe if Arizona is up or they're on their game, the Browns are pressing the scoreboard and they've got to throw. Maybe that is in this range of outcomes here.
He's $6K, man. He's 500 more than like McCole Hardman. Like it's so cheap. Like I can't. I'm gonna have to do it again, and it's gonna be terrible. So
yeah, and I don't care that he did bad last week, because even in a game that had that many points, because I'm like one of these things, like I'm dead on, like the Chargers are not giving up anything to lead wide receivers.
Mm-hmm. For sure.
So I don't really care. The week before he should have had a monster game, and then his first week back he did have a really solid game at a 30% target share. I mean, I don't know what this thing is with they don't have a connection or what it is, because he's played 26 games now with the Browns and he just has 2 100-yard games.
Sure. I mean, speaking of 100-yard games, are we going to get one from Nuke ever again? Like this is like, I mean, the volumes, I mean, okay, but like let's talk about like these price tags. He's 7,700, man. Like I think we need a little bit more at that price. We have guys down here like DJ Moore, Terry McLaurin, Jamar Chase. I prefer all of those guys than Nuke, at least recently in some of these spots, even this week. Like I understand now we have like some other alphas at the top like Kupp and Mike Williams, but man, what do we do with Nuke, man? This seems like a good bounce back spot too.
Yeah, I mean, we talked a little bit, maybe, he played 2 weeks kind of hurt, and his target shares dipped. They were 11.8% and 17.7%, weeks 2 and 3. Then he comes back and it goes to 24% in week 4. And then last week it's 32% last week. He still is second in the NFL in route participation per team dropback. So he's out there a ton. It's not like he's getting like reduced in that capacity. And then on the Cleveland side, they are dead last in points allowed to opposing wide receiver ones through 5 weeks. Tyreek Hill got them for 11, 197 and 1. Brandon Cooks 9 for 78 and 1. Allen Robinson, the lone guy they stopped, for 2 for 27. Justin Jefferson had 6 for 84 and a touchdown. And then last week, Mike Williams got them for 8, 165 and 2. So alpha wide receivers have been bullying games on the Browns. So I mean, this could be a spot where we have a spike week. I just don't know. Like you said, though, we've kind of been talking about this a few off and on your show throughout the course of the season, early in the season. Just the contributions they're getting from these other players are just better, though.
That's what I was going to say. Like, and they can't price them up because it's been so spread out, right? So it's like a wheel of, is it going to be Rondale Moore week? Is it going to be Christian Kirk week? Is AJ Green going to steal one of the touchdowns? So like, I don't know what to do with those guys, but I'm sure like a lot of people feel that way, right? So like, it's not a great spot for fantasy from that perspective, at least.
No, it's frustrating, and that's why we joked a couple weeks ago about, do we just like, can you play Kyler naked? But it's because how do you get it right? I mean, how do you get Rondale Moore, Christian Kirk, and AJ Green right so far this season? Like,
I'm personally not so far, that's for sure.
I'm in the same boat. Hell, I haven't got Duke right yet.
The TikTok people are really upset because all the buy lows are these Arizona wide receivers, and they go off, and then they are terrible. So yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, because their usage just isn't high enough to have any type of consistency. I mean, there's just not enough there. Maybe the Max Williams injury allows them to play more four wide receiver sets than they have to start the year. Maybe that's a part of the skeleton key that helps us, but. You look at the usage for Christian Kirk and Rondale Moore, like you just are taking blind darts on this. You're just taking blind swings on those guys. Like if you hit it, you hit, but like there's no objective like North Star telling us to play those guys. It's literally just saying we're gonna mix them in for the hell of it.
And I would feel better about the skinny stack with Kyler if he was running more, right? So like if he's gonna continue to get spreaded around, like I don't know, like it does feel still like a just DeAndre Hopkins, and maybe if you wanted to add someone to that, just I don't know. I've been not playing enough probably Arizona because I like to do these like kind of more full stacks, and it never really feels right with Kyler.
Yeah, and then we've got the other side of it too. Is we talked about the Browns. All right, well, eventually they're gonna have these passing touchdowns, but also this is such an objectively strong spot for their running game. So they lead the NFL in yards per carry over their opponent, and Arizona's 30th in that category. The Browns lead the NFL in rushing yards on explosive runs of 10 or more yards. Arizona is 31st in yards allowed on those types of runs, and they are allowing 4.8 carries per game to opposing running backs of 10 or more yards. So, I mean, that would just be another signal. It's like, all right, well, we're just going to keep jamming in these running backs. I mean, Nick Chubb has 20 or more carries the past 3 weeks. We know he's always got to get into the paint. That's how it rolls in fantasy, so you're paying for that. Kareem Hunt's on like a ridiculous heater. He's got 155, 86, and 89 yards from scrimmage the past 3 weeks with 4 touchdowns. He's also got 13 catches in those games.
And he's 7,400 now. And like you get no discount on either of these guys.
Nope.
It's tough.
You got to pay for him. The interesting about Hunt is he has just 40% of the backfield touches, which is actually a lower rate than Cordell Patterson. Of his backfield. So
don't do it to me.
He's running even. It's crazy how hot he's running. He's the RB6 in overall scoring right now, but he's RB15 in expected points. He's just running ridiculously pure. But you would say, all right, well, everyone's going to be on this running game right this week because Arizona's been bad against the run. The Browns are home favorites. But man, what if this is one of those spots where the Browns have it is one of those oscillation spots where this is the three touchdown game. The Baker 3 passing touchdown game. Now the Browns are also one of those teams. He could throw 3 touchdowns to these randoms, right? Like he could throw an Austin Hooper touchdown. We saw he threw a touchdown to Rashard Higgins and David Njoku last week. So like it's not like he's easy to stack either.
Seems like a skinny stack game to me, Reeves. I don't know. Maybe some mini stacks involved. I don't really like the onslaught with either of these teams. I don't think.
Yeah, but it's a very peculiar game because we've seen like the Browns are capable of playing in these shootouts. We know Arizona is. So I mean, it's going to be a fun game, and it's going to probably rip your hair out type of game when you look back on it in hindsight.
Yeah. Do you like, I guess, either side of this game, or I guess are you attacking this over and under? It's 50 points currently right now, so I still feel like this one might be a little bit light as well.
Yeah, I like this game to go over there too. I think that both these teams are capable. I think the Arizona team total being just 24, it's 23 and 23 and change.
Yeah,
is light. I think that they're gonna score 24 plus, and I definitely think the Browns can answer back. And they're favored. So yeah, I kind of like this one being a little bit a go over spot too.
All right, let's touch on quickly. This is like your exact words, is you thought this one might be a little bit weird, but we should still talk about it because there's some plays here. So we have Houston at Indy. Houston has a 17 implied team total, so that's a little bit rough, but it looks like the Colts on the other side implied for almost 27 points. So we never, every now and then we get these lower game totals that still have these guys that are priced to a point where it still makes a lot of sense, right? Is that kind of what you're alluding to here?
Yeah, and then you look at the Colts. I mean, the Colts have a legit team total.
Yeah.
I mean, we just talked about the Browns. They have the same team total as the Browns
for sure
this week.
Sure. So like, I mean, and it's so condensed on the other side. With, I mean, it does make some sense. Even just if you wanted to stack up, even like a mini stack in this game, you know exactly where you're going on the Houston side.
Right, and we actually saw Davis Mills be capable last week. I don't know how sticky that will be, and leave it to fantasy football to have Davis Mills light up the Patriots a week after he had negative fantasy points and the Patriots just stomped Tom Brady out for his worst game of the year. But that's how this stuff works sometimes. But it was nice to actually see that Davis Mills is capable, because it at least gives us in the back of our mind, it's like, all right, well, yeah, Davis Mills probably most weeks in this Houston offense, because Tyrod he's not going to play this week. They already said he's not. He was eligible to come off. He's not going to play. So it's going to be Davis Mills at least one more week. But at least it gave us kind of the imprint of like some big plays can happen in this offense. It's still capable of going down. So maybe they do punch back. We don't know. On the other side, obviously we got the Colts with a good team total to invest in, and people might stay away because of the low to overall game total. It's 42.5. Carson Wentz is pretty interesting. So Carson Wentz is no one likes Carson Wentz, but he's on FanDuel. He's had basically 18 or more fantasy points in every game but one, and it was the game he wasn't supposed to play in, where he came back with the 2 hurt ankles.
That's a crazy low price tag, Reap. 6,700 for a quarterback doesn't happen on FanDuel often.
Yeah, and he's gotten there. Like, it's not like we're just jamming in the price and the matchup. Like, he's had 18 or more fantasy points on FanDuel in every game but one.
Yep.
And Tennessee or Houston, I can't want to call them Tennessee. They're 22nd in completion rate allowed. They're 24 in yards allowed per pass attempt. They're 16th in yards allowed per completion. So I mean, you're getting a high floor at 6,700 with potential to have matchup elevation as well. So there's an opportunity there too, I think. And obviously, Jake does his segment after me, but I can guarantee you one of his locks of the week is going to be Michael Pittman. I could just easily tell you this right now. Michael Pittman's going to be his locks of the week. He played on Monday night. He's 5,800.
5,800, 7 targets, gets in the box.
He's the wide receiver 17 in expected points on the season. He has 29% of the team targets over the past month. He has 6 targets in at least each of the past 4 games. So I mean, there's all kinds of opportunity at this price. I mean, I hope I'm not wrong, and I didn't or step on Jake. But
I hope he's watching this right now, and he's like, well, I was going to say all 3 of those things, and now I can't. So thanks, Reeves.
I have a feeling he'll be in the locks of the week segment. And then we also have Jonathan Taylor in kind of a smash spot, because obviously high team total, 10-point home favorites.
Sure.
And after a slow start to the season, he's had back-to-back top 10 scoring weeks. Houston, bad against the run, 4.7 yards per carry to running backs. That's 28th. They're 24th in rushing points allowed per game to opposing backfields. And 29% of the fantasy points they've allowed all season have been via rushing, which is the highest rate in the NFL. So you also have Jonathan Taylor at 7,500 also in play. And like you said, if you just want to run it back, it's really easy. You've got Brandon Cooks sitting there at 6,500. We did see the past 2 weeks, like, he's just not bulletproof based on volume. But also, we can still follow that volume in terms of like a game stack. So he wasn't going to always have 40% of the team targets. Like, there's always going to be a week where he had a hiccup, and hopefully that was last week. But he still is just carrying that extremely lofty team target share and air yard share that you can bring it back against the Colts defense that is just littered with injuries, and they're 30th in yards per target allowed to opposing wide receivers. And they've allowed 10 touchdowns to opposing wide receivers, which is the most in the NFL so far through 5 weeks. So you've got your natural bring back as well.
Yeah, I mean, we've been talking about how Brandon Cooks is just running away with like the target share, air yards, all the weighted opportunity metrics, all of those. And now Devontae Adams is still the only one that's ahead of Brandon Cooks. Last week, he's got the Patriots, all the Belichick narratives with Brandon Cooks, I suppose. But man, I'm definitely back on that at that price point. Even Zach Pascal, man, 5,300. I don't even mind that, just because of his usage in the red zone, touchdown heavy site. Like, he's never going to have a huge yardage total, but would anyone be shocked if Zach Pascal got in the box once or twice? Like, I don't think I would be. So I'm warming up to this one, Reeves. I'm glad we talked about this game for sure.
Yeah, we try to mix one weird one in. We talked about not having enough time on the segment. We've been kind of wedging in a fourth game the last couple weeks. So hey, it's more the merrier.
All right, so everyone out there, I want you to pause this video. I want you to let me know in the comments your favorite game stack for week 6. And Reebs, like I said, I let you down last week. I didn't get your late swap in, but we're gonna let you go ahead and build another one. But last week, we'll give you the cash on that one since it was my fault. So let's do this. You ready to build a team?
Yeah. I mean, listen, I feel like we've been there every week. We're right on the door. I feel like I'm scoring like 120 every week in these. So like we just need to get over the hump and really knock one down.
All right, so I guess we'll start as we always do. We went through a couple different games. This is the stack segment. So you're starting with one of these stacks today?
Yeah, let's do it. I mean, it's tough this week because there are so many options. Oh,
there is. You can start skinny. We can always move towards that.
I know the direction is, do we go? I don't want to do a chief stack on a show ever.
Sure.
Just because obviously
we always talk about too. It's not easy to build this team this early in the week. It really is not. So
I mean, I'm debating right now. Do we try to build a Heineke team, or do we go crazy and we do the Wentz? Let's get weird. Let's just do the Wentz team because whatever.
I love it.
What the hell, man?
So we got Wentz. We're pairing him, I imagine, with Pittman. We're gonna have to obviously Wentz is gonna be contrarian, but I think that Pittman's gonna gain some steam as the week goes on for sure. So
I think Pittman will be the go-to guy for is a one-off, right? Like he's gonna be the one-off guy for everybody. But at least this gives me the stack with him.
I'm with you.
And then we'll bring Cooks back.
Okay.
So we'll just get weird on that one all together.
I like it.
Now that should give us a bunch of money.
Yeah, I would assume so. We have 6,800 the rest of the way, and we haven't even picked defense yet. So, you can
play whatever you want. The thing about Wentz is I'm probably not going to get 30 from Wentz, but if you can get me 20 or so, I can get some high ceiling assets, hopefully.
There's a lot of ceiling on this slate, Reeves, so I think that's not the worst idea in the world, for sure. And it's at 1 p.m., so you're going to know right away if this stack hits, and if it doesn't, you can kind of go a little bit different the rest of the way.
Now, we have weird 4 o'clock games, though, is the only thing about this slate.
True.
We have Browns, Cardinals is the one out. So we can jam in some of those high-priced guys, and maybe that gives us some shuffling later. But Patriots, Cowboys probably is going to be one-sided. You might see some steam on Jacoby Myers as the week comes out, but the Patriots guys aren't going to be really owned. And then we've got this Broncos-Raiders game. So in terms of high-priced guys to even be able to pivot off of, there aren't a lot, really. They're all in the Browns game. So let's lock up some salary at 4 o'clock. And I don't know if this will work or not, because whatever, I'm not going to hit you up to do a late swap anyways. But just theoretically, let's say if I was late swap this team, and maybe I'll build this team and we'll have to late swap it.
Right.
Let's put Darren Waller in this lineup.
I like it.
The
Waller flop lag.
The Waller flop lag. If you look at his usage, everything points to that he's still a top 5 tight end in terms of usage. And we've seen Waller do this before, right? Where he goes dormant for a few weeks. It's not uncommon for him.
It's half the year last year, and then he went crazy 3 weeks in a row, right? Because the volume was still the same.
Yeah, because the volume's the same and you just hit. And he's a guy that can break, he can catch short passes and turn a touchdown. So we'll put Waller in, and he gives us options to pivot to if we get there and if our Wentz stack doesn't hit, we can go down to Dalton Schultz. We can go down to Noah Fant. We've got some, so he gives us locks in salary. Plus, a lot of people I think are going to play Kelsey and they're going to play Ricky Seals-Jones.
Yeah, I mean,
those are going to be
when Kelsey's back on the slate, Waller's almost just by default much lower owned because everyone wants to either get to Kelsey or pay down. It's one or the other. So I'm with you.
Yeah, he's a limbo guy, a purgatory pricing.
Yeah, exactly. All right, so let's. I'm gonna make you play some sort of defense so I have any idea where we're going here.
Right.
So the cheap ones are not my favorite this week. Even just the first. Even some of these home teams are in tough spots. Chicago against Green Bay, probably not doing that. Cleveland against Arizona. I don't know, man. Is there a cheap one down here that you really like?
Yeah, I'm willing to go back to the Vikings.
Okay.
We'll see what we can do. We might be, and if we not, we'll go up. But the Carolina Panthers are 6th in the NFL in turnovers plus sacks allowed per game. Okay. So the Vikings have gotten a sprinkling of points every week. So I mean, I like them at 30. I think they're underpriced. I actually have them in my top 10 rankings this week as well.
Okay.
So we'll go Vikings. That gives us a little bit. If we need to go up, maybe we can get to the Packers later or something. That's fine. We'll see what we do. Let's lock in that 37 though.
You can do almost whatever you want. You got 7,500 the rest of the way.
All right, so let's go with Tyreek then. We'll put Tyreek in. So there's a chunk of money. And Tyreek's gonna be popular, but I think I have a really kind of unique build going right now. So
I think
whatever.
So too. Yep. So 7,200 still the rest of the way. Like it's not like you have to get too crazy with value now.
I have 3 wide receivers though.
Yep. So you have 2 running backs and a flex left right now.
So who do we? Let's get someone on the Washington side though too. Just so let's do it. Let's bring Antonio Gibson back.
I like it.
I mean,
no one's gonna play that guy. It's not gonna happen.
Well, and also because one, he's got the Q tag, and 2, the narrative is gonna be, and for good reason, is that like in these types of game scripts, you see more J.D. McKissic, right?
That's true.
But it's a tournament, man. Whatever. I'm trying to win the thing, not get to these 120 that I've been getting.
He had 20 rushing attempts last week, and everyone's acting like he's just a mess. And he scored 2 touchdowns. I don't know. He's underpriced.
So we'll bring Gibson back. Yep. So we got. This is a weird team. It's not a team like we.
It's a weird team, but you got lots of salary left. 7,400 the rest of the way for a running back and a flex.
Okay, so man, so do we go with Chubb's 81, Hunt 74? We've got Jonathan. We can't play Jonathan Taylor though because we got too many. We're on the other side of the Colts.
Yeah, probably.
So we can't play Jonathan Taylor. We got DeAndre Swift at 71.
Yep. You could go. Mixon, you might be able to get to Eckler on this build.
If we do Eckler, what does that leave us?
If you played Eckler, you got 6,500 in the flex, so the range you're looking at basically is like Damian Williams, TJ Hawkinson, all the tight ends essentially, Mark Andrews, T. Higgins. So it is kind of a weird range if you go with Eckler for sure. You could go a little bit cheaper than that, or a little bit more expensive than that, and then play Odell though at 6K.
We could, if we put Odell on at the flex, what does that let us get up to at running back?
Let's see.
Can we get to McCaffrey?
You're 1,100 away from McCaffrey, so yeah, I guess it doesn't really even do a ton for you. That's rough.
It doesn't. So let's do. Let's just put Swift in then.
Okay. Swift is 71. So then now you have 78 in the flex. Okay, so you're looking at a better range now. So we can put Hopkins in. Yep. Now you can play Nuke. Rich Hribar, everyone. Want to remind you guys that I do give away free sports memorabilia every single week. So check out this video right here next to see what I pulled from the Week 6 Pristine Auction Mystery Box.